you for the background music, Anzi. We're about more than half of our signed on participants are here. So I would like to encourage everyone to go ahead and turn on their video, but leave your audio off, the mute function, so we can focus on our speakers tonight. But they love to see the faces of the audience. So if you can turn your video on, that's appreciated. Thank you everyone for coming to our fireside chat this evening. AIA Houston and Women in Architecture is hosting it. My name is Kiza. I'm the current chair of the Women in Architecture at AIA Houston. With us tonight, we have Amanda Dean, who is our past chair for Women in Architecture. She's not an architect, she's actually a professional engineer, and she will be moderating the conversation tonight. She's a founding member of both WiA and the AIA Houston Jedi Collective, past chair and current fundraising chair for WiA Houston, and past advisor for the Future Women in Architecture Committee at University of Houston, where she has been teaching the Technical Studies program since 2014. Her Bachelor of Science is from Rutgers, and her Master of Engineering from the University of Texas in Austin. She's an editor of Modern Steel Construction magazine, and during her undergraduate career, worked part-time with a geotechnical firm, construction company, and architecture firm. Needless to say, she is very involved with architecture and women in architecture, and WiA is kind of her passion. So we're really grateful to have her as an ally here tonight. Our speakers tonight, we have Anzilla Gilmore, who's an FAIA and NOMAC member. She's actually the founder and current treasurer of the Houston chapter of the National Organization of Minority Architects. And she sits on the NOMA National Finance Committee. She's the 2020 recipient of the inaugural Texas Architects Award for Equitable Practice in Architecture in honor of John S. Chase Jr. FAIA. She's a 2021 AIA Houston board member and the founder and current advisor to the Architects Foundation Diversity Advancement Scholars Mentorship Program. She was the 2019 chair of the AIA's National Ethics Council and elevated to the College of Fellows in February of 2019. Her Bachelor of Architecture was from the School of Architecture at Prairie View A&M University, and a master's from the University of Texas at Arlington. She is the 5th female registered architect in the state of Texas and the first in the city of Houston in 2004 as a woman of color. She is someone who we are just loving watch break so many barriers. She worked in a traditional architectural practice in Waco and Houston before transitioning to project management, where she's currently the assistant director for project management and engineering and the diversity and inclusion program director at Rice University. Our second fireside chat speaker is Michelle Addington. She is the dean of the University of Texas Austin School of Architecture. She holds the Henry M. Rockwell Chair in Architecture at the University of Texas at Austin. She previously served as the Gerald Hines Chair in Sustainable Architecture and Design at the Yale University of Architecture, and was jointly appointed as a professor at the Yale University School of Forestry and Environmental Design. Prior to teaching at Yale, she taught at the Harvard University Graduate School of Design, Technical University of Munich, Temple University, Philadelphia University. Originally, she was educated as a mechanical and nuclear engineer. So we have a couple engineers at our disposal today. She worked for several years as an engineer with NASA at the Goddard Space Flight Center and for EI DuPont de Nemours before she studied architecture. Her teaching, research, and professional work span across those disciplines with the overarching objective of determining strategic intersections between the optimal domains of physical phenomena with the practical domains of spatial, geopolitical, economic, and cultural systems. Addington received a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from Tulane before getting a Bachelor of Architecture from Temple University and a Master in Design Studies and Doctor of Design from Harvard University. She also holds an honorary Master of Architecture from Yale University. So if you haven't been impressed by everything I've said, I know you will be impressed once you start listening to them speak and hearing some of the questions from Amanda. A couple of house rules as we enter this Zoom platform. By now, we've been on this long enough that everyone should have an idea of what the standard is. If you have any questions, please send them into the chat, and Amanda, Dean, Rhonda, who is our AIA staff liaison, who is always incredible at these things, and myself will be monitoring these, answering some questions if we can via chat, or else Amanda will bring them up to our speakers towards the end after she started her initial kind of Q&A that she prepared for everyone here. So Amanda, could you put the slideshow back up, and I want to briefly mention a couple of other events that are happening within AIA community that are things that we're trying to let you guys know about and support, because I know that once the fireside chat ends, there's not going to be a whole lot of hangout and chat function. It's a little harder. Please stay if you think you can do so. But AIA Houston, the JEDI and Houston NOMA Forum is putting together a event on Monday, December 7th at 6:00 p.m. We will have Kimberly Dowdle, AIA NOMAC, and Jason Pugh, AIA NOMA, keynote speaking for the event, and then it'll have a few breakout sessions afterwards that focus on the justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion and design. We also have an event that Latinos in Architecture is putting together on December 17th. It's called Bridging Art and Architecture. It's a conversation with visual artist Carolina Otero and the curator Rosa Ana Orlando. So we'd like to encourage you all to check out these events and sign up for them. And then on Wednesday, December 9th, from 6 to 7:30, we will be celebrating everything that we've accomplished despite these trying times in 2020 and all of the positive that we've been able to pull from this year for the Women in Architecture end of year celebration. So please sign up for all three of these events. And with that, I'm going to silence myself and turn the table over to Amanda to kind of start this fireside chat. So thank you all for being here. Again, feel free to turn on your videos and keep the mute on so that our speakers can see your faces while they engage in conversation.
Thank you, Keitha, and thank you everyone for being here, and thank you especially Dean Addington and Anzie for making time to share with us this evening. Ideally, we'd be by a fireside in some woman-designed space listening to Nina Simone, but we're here on Zoom. So if I'm assuming everyone who has their camera off is sitting next to a cozy fire with a glass of wine, listening to us. And as Keitha said, there's some accomplishments between our speakers this evening. Actually, they're tremendously accomplished and have done so despite many obstacles. And you're now, Anzie has asked me to say that I'm not a professor, but we mentioned that earlier. I'm a professor and the dean is a dean. So we have different roles in universities, but Dean and Anzie, you are both incredibly accomplished and at top tier architecture schools. But in these roles, you've decided to challenge the status quo and in the pursuit of equity and inclusion, and oftentimes with uncomfortable objectives. I wonder if you would like to talk about what drives you to pursue change and what change in particular are you most hoping to achieve? Dean Addington, I'll ask you to go first.
Well, I think one of the things that has always driven me is this idea of the fact that there's so little that we know about the world around us. That often when we define what it is that we do and what our territory is, we actually cause our world to shrink. And, you know, I find it fascinating, those things that are on the edges, those things that are on the margins, those places where there could be possibly new discoveries for us. And one of the things that I noticed, you know, many, many years ago is that the people who were working on the edges, on the margins, the ones who are excavating new territory, the ones who were mining mining into the chasms or the gaps of areas that no one was dealing with, were also sort of people who in themselves were on the margins and marginal. We know that so much of what's happened in sustainability has actually been driven by women. I've been fascinated by that. There was actually a book by a Houston architect many, many years ago called Women in Green. Lance Hosey co-wrote that book. But, you know, and women as well are, interestingly enough, in our field, are the ones that have really pioneered the development of new technologies and new materials in our field. And then if you think about what's been happening with people of color, with many African-American architects, it has been opening up, you know, very much the idea of a challenge to, Western European orthodoxy in the way that we think about what is the core essence of design. And I think the part that excites me the most is this movement into sort of engaging more fully with our community. And again, very much driven by African-American architects and African-American thinkers, as well as many of our Latinx practitioners and thinkers and academics as well. And so this is what drives me, is that we have untold opportunity, untold potential that's just waiting for us to engage with. And, you know, by embracing inclusion and diversity, we're actually giving ourselves bigger space and bigger opportunities as architects.
So what drives me to pursue change? Honestly, and you may have heard me say this before, but I kind of feel like I'm stumbling through the profession. I cannot say that I honestly set out to do anything spectacular. I am really just doing what I do. So I am a bit of a busy bee. I like to work. If you invite me to a thing and want me to do a thing, I'm probably going to do a lot more that I really should do. So what drives me, I think, is a work ethic that has found me in a spotlight in a way that I haven't really sought. But I do it now intentionally, because I think it is important to be seen. I know when I was in the School of Architecture, I had never met a Black female architect, and I wanted to make sure that that is not something that happens to any other Black architect, Black female architect, or aspiring Black female architect in my 200-mile radius. So that is really what drives my pursuit of change, just to make sure that it's not like this in 20 years, because it's been like this for too long.
Absolutely, I agree. And that's interesting that, you didn't seek the spotlight, but I think from having known you that, well, you definitely can carry an audience, but the spotlight's on you. And the whole idea of who gets that spotlight and for what reasons has really been a conversation in particular the Starchitect or the Black Cape architect. And there's almost been a mythos created around the idea that a Black Cape architect can sweep in and dictate to minions, this is the design, which may or may not have led to the concept of maybe architecture as elitism or separate or above. What do you think about that perception and the kind of, I don't know, mythology around elitism / and architecture? And do you think that that perception limits architecture?
I absolutely think it limits architecture. I think, so I went to Prairie View A&M for undergraduate school and ended up going to graduate school at UT Arlington and quickly realized that I didn't speak architecture. I did not learn Archi-Speak at Prairie View. And my first class, they're talking and I know it's English, but I don't know what they're talking about. And I have found, I am now, I understand it. I don't speak it very well, but I at least understand the language. And I find it elitist. I find it to be a way that architects speak that sets them apart. And I don't know if architects feel like it's an important thing to do, but I think it leaves the layperson in a place where they're intimidated by the architect and will, rather talk to a contractor or developer about whatever project they're trying to do because the architect is speaking a language they don't understand. So I honestly, the Black Cape architect, I think is hilarious. When I see an architect in the Cabusier glasses and the black turtleneck and the cape, it's like it's Halloween and they dressed up like an architect. I have been in interviews with architects when I worked at U of H before I came to Rice, and we were interviewing architects for a new engineering building. And we had a Black Cape architect come in literally in a black cape. I thought, are you kidding me? And it was for an engineering project, right? And I'm like, you don't even know your audience. You don't know enough about yourself to know that the engineers probably think you're ridiculous, and they did not get the project. So the Black Cape architects that I like, for David Adjay is one of them. And I like him because he was given an award. I think he was an honorary fellowship, something. It was a big, gaudy medal that was given to him at this ceremony. And they put it around his neck and he looked at it and he said, thank you. And they kept talking. And then when it was over, he said, can I take this off? And I was like, I like him. He's perfect. So I absolutely think architecture is elitist. And I think we should do a better job of trying to connect more with the community. The first thing is breaking down that barrier and learning how to speak to normal people.
I totally agree. And I'm going to add to sort of like the sartorial, aspects of it. There's also the Bernard Shumie scarf, which is very popular, and socks.
Yes.
Socks are a big piece of this as well. But one of the things that I began to notice and actually started to feel really claustrophobic about, I spent 25 years in the Ivy League, as a student and then a teacher. And you get to a point where you really think you are in the center of the universe, that everything important that happens in the architecture world happens within a circle of people that you know, or the people you talk to, people that you socialize with. I even got to the point where I thought I could walk. Anytime I was walking down a street in New York, I ran into architects I knew, which wasn't telling me that there were a lot of architects. It was just telling me we had such limited places that we all went to on this. And it finally hit me at some point that it was a tiny little echo chamber, that we were only interested in speaking to each other. And you were either in or you were a nobody. And that really started to trouble me because the world that we were in on was a teeny tiny little world. You know, it was a world of certain kinds of commissions and not others, of certain kinds of boutique firms and not others. It was not in the world. We weren't talking to the world. We were only talking to ourselves and isolating ourselves from the world. And it finally hit the point that even though I was about to retire, I realized I couldn't be there one more day. You know, I couldn't stay there one more day as part of that. And I would say that, you know, yes, I'm not there anymore and I'm not part of the clique anymore, but it's still a clique. You know, you start to think about it. Yes, it's actually a bigger clique than what I recognize. And, you know, for all of us who are in that. And, you know, it's the kind of separation that we have, which comes down to even what we define as our product, you know, as what we define as architecture. I was always taken by the fact that, and these numbers are only going down. You know, when I was a student, the number used to be that architects were only involved in 10% of residential construction in this country. I've pressed a number of different people for what the current number is, and I'm getting anywhere from 3 to 7%. And when we think that our job is the you know, home for you know, a billionaire or a multimillionaire, you know, on Billionaires Row in New York, or, you know, a spectacular single family home, but not how people live in the world. You know, when we think it's really the premier museum project and not, you know, the quotidian, you know, whether office park or institutional building, we actually have cut ourselves out of so much of what we could be doing by defining ourselves with such small territory.
And that is interesting how we define ourselves and our purpose. You know, as a structural engineer, my job is for the building to stand up, preferably for a long time. So we have this dual reality when designing for the present and the future. And I think that there's some hubris involved to think that what we do now is relevant to the unborn masses that live in a future we can't even imagine. And I think that kind of encourages some of this elitism, but living here in the now is full of hard things to look at. The community where we're going to build this next stadium per se, does that community want this? And then that requires uncomfortable conversations. And so I guess kind of twofold. How do you experience currently community in your role? Do you engage community, and if not, where do you see opportunities to involve community more in architecture, both on the institutional side and on the facilities side, when you're creating for these students who will hopefully want to engage with the community?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question, because it's definitely not something that you know, we talked about at Harvard or Yale, you know, in terms of truly engaging with the community. And, you know, one of the things I've been so fascinated with at UT Austin is that we actually have a large number of initiatives that we do with the community, but mostly through our planning programs. So the planners have a large number of different types of, you know, initiatives, programs, their research, their analysis that involve directly working with the community. And for the ones on the design side of things, that's kind of new. I've been really interested to you know, for many of our students who have asked for us to be much more involved with the community. Many of the architecture students said, why aren't we involved with the community? Well, we have a lot of programs where we're very involved with the community, but it tends to be the planners who are out there. So for us, it's actually sort of beginning to realize that we have to see ourselves not as architects, not as interior designers, not as urban designers, but as the purveyors, the ones who are responsible for the built environment, which means that planners are part of what we do, that each one of these fields are part of what we do, as opposed to architecture defines itself in this particularly narrow way. What I'm hoping is that we can start to get more integration across our different programs, so that our architecture students can really be directly involved in the community the same way that almost every one of our planning students is.
Yeah, so I can't speak for the education or what's happening in the School of Architecture. I'm in facilities at Rice. I can say that I have sat in on a handful of juries there, and the juries or the particular projects that were a part of the juries that I was on were not necessarily community-based, or at least not Houston community-based, right? They were theoretical sites in other countries. Actually, I sat in on a jury today where they were considering projects on existing roofs, like roof decks on campus. Again, not necessarily, doing anything outside of Rice or anything necessarily for the community, but it's not to say that they're not doing that, but I will say that when I was in school, that architecture was just about architecture, and the skill sets that are necessary to really engage the community are not necessarily things that were being taught. That like Dean just said, the community development, just development in general, were just not things that architects learned how to do. And I think that's another thing that puts us in this little, bubble where I just want to be the designer, and I'm not going to bring any thought to what should go there. I'm just going to do what my client asked me to do. And I think schools of architecture can do a better job of linking these different disciplines and letting architecture students learn the skill sets that can make them, I think they have the skill sets. They're just not, expanding on them in a way to recognize that they can go out and not just wait for someone to come in and say, hey, I've got this project. Every architecture student on earth has driven past a lot and gone, oh, it'd be nice if I could put this here. Well, they could probably go take a class to learn how to finance that they thought, and then figure out how to build it there. We don't teach that. I think maybe because architecture programs are 160 hours and it's just not enough time, but maybe master's program.
No, that's true. And that's the thing. The students they're capable of critical thinking. That's why they are where they are. And we do want to be able to encourage them to engage with the community. I think part of it is because engaging with the community is uncomfortable. Despite how I present, I'm a bit of an introvert. I don't, it's uncomfortable to go out and a lot of times get negative feedback when you're presenting your idea. But I think also, like what you said, Anzie, there seems to be, and I think this is modernism, but there seems to be a desire to get an award. Getting an award comes from a lot of photographs of the building or the project, but it's not the same as experiencing it. We just had the Museum of Fine Arts is having their grand opening of their new expansion. And I've seen a lot of pictures, but it's down the street from me, and I want to experience that. I want to know, how does that feel? And speaking with the community is the best way to do that. So moving over to the uncomfortable part of that, I think both of you are comfortable with being uncomfortable, because the three of us have been outliers at some point during our formal training. And being seen is a really important part of the work that we do and what we're encouraging. I I would like you both to kind of share your experience from your undergraduate, graduate experiences for being an outlier and what that experience was like.
So my undergraduate experience, I was not an outlier. I went to HBCU. It's the last time I got to be a majority, and it's an amazing experience to be a part of the majority. I wish every minority had the opportunity to do it, because it is very liberating. But then I went to my graduate school, which was not an HBCU. And that is where I realized I am really alone. And I don't know how it influenced me. I'll never, ever let anyone go to where I went to school for undergraduate school. It's awful. It's probably not that horrible a place. It just was not a really great experience for me. But it did make me, I think, have more appreciation for my undergraduate degree. I think that it made me appreciate the nurturing experience I got from there, but I can't say that I walked away influenced by it in any way, good or bad. I just wanted to forget it and go do something else. I think I am more influenced by, you know, what is happening now in my career, what happened right after, you know, even when I went into traditional practice. I started off at HOK, and that experience kind of shaped the path that I went down. I went to this huge firm and realized they don't care about me at all. So let me go to a small firm and get more experience and more opportunities there. So it's been kind of how people are treating me in a certain place that will push me into another area. And those are the things that I think influence what I'm going to do, what my next step is going to be. And I guess because I have been treated very well at Rice University, that's why I've been there for 14 years. They haven't upset me yet.
Well, I grew up in Washington, D.C., but to deeply Southern parents. My mother was from Austin, Texas, and her dream was for my sisters and I all to go to the University of Texas at Austin. That's not, my mother went to college in Tennessee, but her mother and her aunts had all gone to University of Texas at Austin. So this is where I was supposed to go. Except right before my older sister was ready to start, there was the clock tower shooting. And so it came off the list. But we were all required to go to schools in the very deep South. So my older sister, even though I grew up in Washington, D.C., my older sister went to University of Mississippi. I started at Auburn, and my younger sister went to University of Georgia. So I started at Auburn as a math major, and then I switched into physics, and I had this sort of amazing guidance counselor, if you can imagine back at that time, a guidance counselor who says, "Have you ever thought about engineering?" And so if you love math and physics, you know, haven't you thought about engineering? So I decided to switch into mechanical engineering. This is all in my first year. Mechanical engineering was going to have none of it. They weren't going to have a woman, a female student. I was only 17. They weren't going to have a girl in their classes. I was actually physically picked up and thrown out of the classroom. And so I spent all this time. The dean was very supportive, and the dean would march back over, tell the professor he had to let me into the classes, the different classes, but, they would automatically give me an F, and I'd have to again argue that actually I had it was a perfect paper, you know, and it was such a struggle that, you know, I finally just left. You know, I left and I went to Virginia Tech, and at Virginia Tech, it was better, but it was still a situation where I was constantly accused of cheating. And I still will say I had the two best professors I've ever had in my life there. I went from mechanical into nuclear engineering. And so these professors were amazing that I had there. The dean could not have been more supportive, and the department chair. But there was still, you know, a professor who just was adamant that there was no way I could be the best student because I had to be cheating. And when I said, well, who am I cheating off of if I'm the best student? He says, you have outside help. You have to have outside help for this. And I got so tired of that I transferred again. And I was married, and my husband had a job in New Orleans. So I ended up at Tulane. At Tulane, it was the first place that they were fine. I was just a student, like everybody else. But I'd say what came of that was this determination that I was going to find a way, that I was going to find a way to major in this field, that I was going to find a way to get through, even if I had to keep going from one school to another school to another school. And I feel lucky. I feel lucky that I had those experiences and realized that there would be a path forward, you know, if I just kept at it. And I also have to say, you know, I had a great safety net, you know, so it wasn't like it was all that risky for me to keep changing. I mean, I had, you know, a family that was incredibly supportive. I had a husband who was incredibly supportive. So, you know, I could make those changes with little risk. So I can't say that I was the boldest person, but I was decisive. And I will say I made a change when I knew it was time to make a change. And I'm grateful for that. Grad school came late for me. I was in my mid 30s before I went to grad school. And then it was just a blast. I loved, you know, being in grad school at that time. I felt like a whole new world had opened up for me, just things that I had never had a chance to study or do before. I got to do in grad school, and I'm forever grateful for that. They'll never get a dime of my money in donation. It was, you know, but nevertheless, I am grateful for that opportunity.
Thank you. If anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat. I'll have to say, I went to Rutgers for my undergraduate, and I started off in plant ecology, as we mentioned earlier, and I knew it wasn't for me at the microbiology part, when it's just line drawings with C's and H's. I said, okay, I need something I can physically see. And I had a engineering program. It has one of the few remaining women's colleges. So they have a dual, they share the burden of developing programming, I guess. And so it wasn't until I left my undergraduate program that I realized there weren't as many women in the field. And so it took me some time to find my group. And luckily I wasn't afraid to kind of step out of my area of engineering, and I found my Women in Architecture group, and I'm really happy to see a lot of them here. They're my support network. They inspire me, and I think have inspired a lot of others. And you both have mentioned that there were times in your early development in schools where you had support and you had a safe space. In addition to like those individuals, I know Professor Nowie taught concrete at Rutgers, and he pretty much just pulled me aside. He's like, you're great at this, so you're going to go to grad school and you're going here. And it was helpful because I needed guidance. What groups, what professional organizations, what is out there that's available to people that's working right now that you can say, this is a good group, or this is a good program that is really doing the work?
Who wants to go first? So I can say, when I was in school, surprisingly, I wasn't really active in anything. When I was in high school, I was a member of every friggin' club, and then to college and went, and I don't want to join anything. And I think I did myself a disservice. So now I tell every student, everyone that I meet, I sing the song of the value of networking, and a thing that I didn't realize was so important until I was probably in my 30s. I would say right now, of course, I'm going to say NOMA. NOMA is the reason why I have achieved all of these accolades. I complained to NOMA when I joined that nobody reached out to me and told me, thank me for my membership money. And they threw me in, and I'll tell you this, don't complain to NOMA because they'll put you to work. But NOMA provides a platform for anyone, if they want to be a leader, to shine. I tell people to join the local chapter, especially young people, to join the local chapter and get active, because it gives you a spotlight in a place where it's safe, right? You're working for this organization, you are showing your work ethic to people, and you're not asking for anything from them, but they will remember you when the time comes and you need a job because you were performing in that organization. And I think the AIA has similar things. You've got all of these communities that put you in touch with everyone. I did not realize the value of popularity. You will be better served in our very small community if you know as many people as possible. So I would say join a thing that you have passion for and work for it. And if you have a passion for it, it doesn't even feel like work. But I'd say NOMA, WiA, I was the Architects Foundation. There are a million things that you can do. Just do something.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, I've watched it, as, NOMA, which has been around now for decades, has, I think continue to build a critical mass. And it has become this place of community, and this place of innovation that it's a particularly fantastic resource for students to be involved in. The other part I wanted to echo and agree with is, one of the things that we have going for us in our field, and so while I might have in the beginning talked about too much the elitism, of the clique, we network like you can't believe. And it's a network such that you can go anywhere in the world, and you'll be welcome. If you invite yourself to an architecture firm that you'd like to see, you'd be welcome. You're bound to have a classmate or someone who can find a way for you. It's an incredible community. Wherever you live, there's an AIA group that you can join. There's an alumni group that you can join. But there's something about architecture that knits us and bonds us closely together, whether it's from doing 2 all-nighters in a row that we all did so many times as students, whether it's because we're relatively small, but we're also a group of people that loves breadth of experience and knowledge. We like our shoes. There's so many things that bring us together, and I feel like we're the envy of almost everybody else out there that doesn't get to be sort of part of our amazing community. But it is an amazing community, and you got to be involved. You know, that's it's there for you, but you got to sort of make the effort to be involved in it.
I completely agree. So the chat has been quiet. If anybody has a question, please put it there. And I suppose since nobody's asked a question, I'll kind of dip into my, the things I'm curious about personally is, so I guess, have you had the experience of being the only one in the room? I'm gonna hazard a guess that you have been the only woman in the room, the only Black person in the room. And have you ever had the experience where you have an all you team, and what is the difference?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear.
Oh yeah, have you had an all you team? I mean, I've had a team that was all women before on a project, and I just felt there was a lot less problems on that.
So I've had a project at Rice where my architect, the associate architect, and the contractor were all women. And I didn't even notice, which was strange. Someone pointed it out. It didn't occur to me because it never happens, right? I don't know why I didn't notice. But as far as being Black, no, that's never happened. I've never, actually, when I walk into a room and I see a Black woman, I'm like, hey, I usually know her, but it's usually Nicola. But that has never happened, aside from, you know, being an undergrad. It hasn't, and I don't expect that it will ever happen. There are, I think, 25 Black female architects in the city now, which is a huge stride in the past 16 years. I'm really happy that I'm not the only one anymore, but it's rare that, you know, we run across each other in a professional setting. I see Nicola and I see Katara, you know, working and coming for interviews at Rice. But that's it.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, now that I'm in administration, let's just say the landscape hasn't changed all that much. You know, you'll see these ebbs and flows, and it's you start to see, you know, an increase in diversity. You see more women, you see more people of color, and then there's sort of a point where someone goes, check, we got this, and we can now go back to how we hired before. So it tends to be kind of wavering, almost a little bit like a sine wave within that. I will say where it happens, and it actually goes back to the very first thing that I said, is in particular areas. That I will be at a symposium, and most of the symposia that I speak at will be ones that deal with advanced materials and technologies, and you'll suddenly realize that every speaker is a woman. And so there'll be those types of moments when you think, this is really cool. You know, this whole developing area that's so important to our field, and you know, everyone in here that, you know, was invited to speak as a woman. And it's not because someone was purposely picking them. It really is that it's a field that is that much owned by women. So I think that's where I see that. So I don't see it in the normal mix of, you know, if I think about that sine wave, is it kind of going up like really slowly? Yeah, maybe. but in these pockets, when it shows up, it's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, no, I can say the exact, that the NOMA conference, when I go there every year, I say to it feeds my spirit, because I do walk into that and I'm like, oh my God, they're all here. And it is a wonderful, wonderful experience.
I mean, that's the thing. We've we've switched professions, we've moved schools, we've moved jobs, because we're all looking for an opportunity to be our authentic selves, to really reach in deep and be who we truly are. And that's a gift that it helps us to be able to express ourselves fully, and it helps the companies that we work for, because they're getting our best versions of ourselves. So there's no reason not to encourage that at all levels. I do have a few questions, just 2 quick questions at the end. One is particular for Anzie. Can you expound more on how you navigated your dual identity and rose to the board table? And in particular, can you share with younger architects some leadership strategies for navigating any particular discrimination, gaslighting? Everyone will be different on how they want to choose it, but there's a source of strength by hearing your story.
My dual identity. I'm not sure what that means. I mean, I'm biracial, if that makes a difference. My mother's white. My father is from the Caribbean. So, but I'll say that every person of color has a dual reality, that I am who I need to be in any, particular circumstance. So I am very cautious about not being the angry Black woman. I don't, I will say I hold back in ways that I feel under normal circumstances I shouldn't have to. I don't in my real life. I have had a supervisor tell me I was too nice, and I know I'm doing that on purpose. I am nicer than my genuine self at work, because I have to be. That's what that's what works for me. But I imagine everyone does that on some level, right? At least that's what I hope. That not just me, and that I'm not just fake. I'm just, I think you do. To me, it's politics. You've got to be able to say the things you need to say to get your job done. I am a project manager in my everyday life. I need them to trust me. So when I meet a client, I need to say and do whatever it is I need to do so they see me and recognize she can be trusted. And then I can do my job and they can do their job and everybody's happy. I don't know if that answered the question.
It does. It's helping how to navigate. And I guess the last question, we're at time. What do you see as the biggest challenge for younger generations coming up now?
I think one of the things that is going to be particularly difficult, and I watched this, through the generations. I think about my mother and what she went through as a woman who was determined to succeed in a man's world and a man's job. She was a renowned and hard-hitting news reporter during World War II. And there, she dealt with violence, actual violence. For me, a lot of it was, in your face, confrontation. I watched as sort of like, these next generation of women, things were more implicit, things were more hidden in terms of, in some cases, unconscious bias that they were dealing with. In other cases, it was just sort of a little bit sort of under the skin. What I worry about is I see what's happening in our world today is that it's going to be all of those, that we're going to see, some violence. We'll see the anger, we'll see unconscious bias, that it isn't about sort of like finding what the mode is and sort of learning to sort of respond or adapt to this mode. It's recognizing that so all of these things are out there, and of course it's not necessarily just out there as we're thinking about the role of women in this or the role of African Americans in this, but it's also going to be for those of sort of different political viewpoints and things like that, that how we will navigate this world, how we'll navigate the divisions that we have, and some of the divisions we might be the poster children of, and some of these divisions are things that actually are embedded with the fact that we happen to be in a profession that requires a certain amount of education and that serves a particular segment of society. I think this is the biggest challenge for us moving down the road. And, women, we're the majority. If we don't step up to do this, we have to step up to do this. And I think we're going to find more commonality among women in terms of sort of all of these different viewpoints than we might find in multiple different ways. So I think it's a challenge, but I think it's also an enormous responsibility, and it's also an opportunity for us to really begin to wield our influence and our capabilities and our power.
So I think the biggest obstacle, I have two teenage children. I think the biggest obstacle for them is the bubble that social media creates. Not that there's anything wrong with social media, but what I am finding more and more, and I talk about this a lot in this role of diversity and inclusion program director, that everyone is in their own bubble and has lost the ability to be tolerant of people outside of their bubble. We don't listen to each other anymore. And I think as architects, that is absolutely detrimental to our profession. I think that if we are in our architect bubbles with our archi-speak, it's just going to get worse and worse, and we'll continue to build things that are not comfortable places for people to want to be in. I think we have to learn how to put the phone down, get off the internet, and listen to each other, be in a space, be in the moment, participate with the people around us. And I just find that when I'm walking around campus at Rice, they're not really interacting with each other. They're interacting in their phone. And it's the adults too. I do it. I walk around campus checking email. I don't even look up. I can see that I'm not going to fall, but other than that, I'm in this phone. I think we need to learn how to be more present and participate, or we're just, I don't know what's going to happen to us.
I completely agree. I have a 10 and a 7-year-old, and it's something that we all deal with. We struggle with daily. It's the idea of being present and being engaged, and the idea of sitting quietly and just being comfortable with that. Well, thank you. My husband turned on the screen with our children watching.
Oh, Pete.
I just want to say thank you both so much for your time and sharing your voice and being available to all of us right now. I miss terribly being around others and look forward to being around both of you in the future. And I really suggest to everyone who's here now, get involved in Women in Architecture, and the men too, because then you can, as you get involved, like me, you can ask people that you want to talk to sit and talk to you for an hour, and they end up saying yes. Again, thank you so much all for being here. Kiza, I don't know if you have any closing remarks, but Anzie, Dean Addington, I couldn't be more grateful for your time and your voice.
It was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
On behalf of Women in Architecture and AIA Houston, thank you, Anzi and Michelle, for being here and sharing your really amazing experiences with everyone. And thank you everyone for tuning in.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.